I knew I was screwed the second he called me darling. We were 38 minutes into the Q3 performance review when Bryce, the new regional manager with the charisma of a used car lot and the ethics of 1-2, paused the slide deck, tapped his laptop like he was summoning a demon, and said, "Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we?" I was the elephant, apparently. And the room, packed with 24 people, including HR, the CFO, two interns who still thought the company pizza was a perk, and most of the board dialing in from glassy offices with $800 light fixtures and the emotional warmth of a dentist drill. "Patricia," he said, oozing performative regret like syrup over a burnt waffle. "After a thorough evaluation, we've decided your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. No warning, no private conversation, no dignity. Just a bullet to the temple wrapped in a PowerPoint transition and a smug smile. It was the smirk that got me. The kind that said this wasn't about performance, this was personal. Bryce loved an audience. He adjusted his tie, Herms, I'm sure, and let the silence thicken like old gravy before adding, "We appreciate your service. Congratulations, you're terminated, darling." And just like that, I was done. After 11 years, 3 bosses, 6 product launches, and 2 system overhauls I personally saved from tanking, I was ejected like a paperclip in a restructuring memo. I stood there, blinking at the screen that had just switched to revenue pipeline forecasts, wondering if I'd just hallucinated the whole thing. If you've ever been fired by a man who uses synergy unironically, you know the particular flavor of rage that bubbles up. The kind that tastes like stale breakroom coffee and broken promises. My ears rang. My hands were cold. I thought of the project I'd just wrapped early. Of the intern I mentored who was now staring at her shoes like she wished she could melt through the floor. Of the company loyalty I had worn like armor, and how thin it suddenly felt. And hey, while you're here, if you're part of the 90% listening without subscribing, maybe hit that follow button, it's free. It genuinely helps this little storytelling crew survive another day in corporate America's Thunderdome. Toss us a like too, unless you're Bryce. Bryce can choke on his KPI dashboards. Anyway, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't even speak. I nodded once because if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out, and calmly packed my things from the conference room while Bryce pretended to care about pipeline variants. My inbox was locked before I made it back to my desk. My ID badge stopped buzzing me into the stairwell. I left the building with my potted plant and my dignity in the same reusable Whole Foods bag. It wasn't until I got home, cracked a beer at 2:13 p.m., and stared at my laptop screen that I remembered the bonus memo. Specifically, Bryce's. A month before the axe fell, I'd been in a cross-department compliance review where the HR director had, out of sheer laziness, attached a full PDF of executive compensation updates instead of redacted summaries. And I, being a nosy witch with an eye for fine print and revenge, downloaded the whole damn thing. Didn't even know why at the time, just one of those little office goblin instincts. I had skimmed it once, laughed at the inflated numbers, and forgot about it. Until now. Until I remembered that clause, one with the asterisk next to his $3 million performance bonus. The clause about bonus eligibility depending on adherence to internal compliance procedures as defined by 3Q protocol guidelines. And I realized something beautiful and horrible at the same time. He'd already broken it, and I had the receipts. Bryce didn't just fire me, he detonated his own safety net. And I was the only one who knew. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly through my nose. No tears, no panic, just the slow, creeping calm of a woman with nothing left to lose and a folder labeled Policy Review Misc PDF that had just become the nuclear launch codes. He wanted to make a show of me? Fine. He just forgot that in corporate theater, there's always a second act. It started that same afternoon, right after the numbness wore off and the beer turned warm in my hand. I opened the old office folder, the one I'd exported out of paranoia 3 restructures ago, the digital equivalent of keeping a crowbar under your bed. I called it random docs, which in corporate speak means evidence I might someday use to burn this place to the ground. In it, org charts from 3 VPs ago, budget approvals from when we still had a travel stipend, and bingo, the compensation memo. I clicked it open. There it was. Bland little PDF titled Executive Adjustments Q2-Q4 that looked like it was assembled by a robot who hated joy. Bryce's name sat in bold next to a paragraph that reeked of overcompensation. $3 million performance bonus, Tier 1, pending completion of strategic objectives, A through E, followed by a nauseating clause. Eligibility is contingent upon uninterrupted compliance with all internal procedural protocols, including, but not limited to, quarterly performance review policies and employee separation guidelines under Section 4B. That was the first crack in the windshield. But I wasn't about to get giddy over one footnote. This was the kind of thing that required surgical patience and the moral flexibility of a raccoon in a dumpster fire. So I started building a timeline. I opened a clean Google sheet, labeled it "Don't open unless fired by a smug sociopath," and began logging everything. Meeting dates, email chains, attachments, review templates, HR memos, even the calendar invite for the quarterly meeting where he gutted me like a fish in front of half the org chart. Then I pulled up the performance review policy from the internal handbook. That thing hadn't been touched since the Obama era, but it still had legal teeth. I cross-referenced it with our current separation guidelines, which Bryce clearly hadn't read past the bullet points. That's when I found the landmine. Section 4B, any involuntary termination conducted outside of private compliance procedure without prior notice and review shall be classified as a protocol breach. If conducted by an executive-level employee, such breach nullifies all pending incentive bonuses for the fiscal quarter. Let me translate that into real talk. If you fire someone like a jackass in public without proper documentation or warning, you blow your own bonus to hell. Bryce had done it with gusto, in a public meeting, with no documented performance warnings, no HR mediation, no legal consult logged in the system, just vibes and a fake apology smile. I laughed, out loud, scared my cat off the couch. Here's the thing about corporate policy. Nobody reads it until it's already too late. Which meant if I marched in waving this clause like a victory flag, I'd get laughed out of the building, or worse, it would tip him off before the trap finished setting. So I stayed quiet. I went full ghost, didn't update my LinkedIn, didn't call anyone, let the rumor mill do its thing. People assumed I was crushed. A few old coworkers texted half-hearted "so sorry, you okay" messages. I replied with thumbs-up emojis and radio silence. Meanwhile, I kept digging. It wasn't just the clause. I found an email from Bryce 2 weeks prior requesting my presence at the Q3 review. That email became Exhibit A, showing premeditation for the firing, no mention of concerns, no warning. Just make sure you're on time for your department update. With that serial killer smiley face he always used like punctuation. I even found an auto-reply he'd sent to legal the week before that said, "Let's circle back after Q3 meeting. Will advisory, Patricia." That little sentence was everything. It meant he hadn't followed protocol before the firing, hadn't even notified legal. He'd done it off the cuff, probably thinking it'd make him look strong. Alpha male garbage. Power play by a guy who drinks protein shakes with a straw. He didn't know it yet, but he'd signed his own financial death warrant. And now, I had to make sure the right people eventually saw it without ever realizing I was behind it. This wasn't going to be a screaming match. This wasn't a social media call-out or a disgruntled ex-employee rant on Glassdoor. No, this was going to be a compliance symphony, and every note would be in his own handwriting. The beauty of corporate sabotage is that no one expects it from someone sipping chamomile tea in a cardigan. Even though I was technically terminated, the paperwork hadn't cleared yet. HR had their usual molasses speed workflow, and because I was on a weird hybrid contract, senior consultant with transition privileges, they couldn't cut me loose without a proper exit review, system deactivation, and some lovely compliance formalities. Bureaucracy, bless her tired soul, gave me a little breathing room. I was a ghost in the machine, but I had admin access to the mainframe, and more importantly, I had Bryce's ego working overtime. He wasn't watching me. He thought he'd already won. I logged in through the back door they'd forgotten to close, an old training account with elevated permissions I'd created back when IT still thought I walked on water. While they were busy planning Q4 retreats and ordering branded hoodies no one asked for, I was slipping through their system like a polite virus, leaving just enough breadcrumbs to look helpful, but never enough to draw suspicion. I started sending emails, little things, innocuous, boring memos with long subject lines like Q3 SOP review employee separation flowchart revisions draft #2. Corporate camouflage. Nobody reads those unless their name's on the CC line and their bonus depends on it. Inside, I carefully included soft reminders. Per Section 4B of the separation guidelines, private meetings and legal review remain mandatory prior to any involuntary offboarding. Confirming verbal advisement is not considered compliant with procedural notice requirements under HR Subclause 9, just flagging that the revised bonus structures are still subject to internal audit reviews, especially in conjunction with leadership-triggered separations. Every sentence was a scalpel, every footnote a fuse. I signed them all cordially, like a good little employee just trying to ensure smooth documentation flow during Q3 transitions. And Bryce? He didn't even blink. Probably saw the email headers and thought, ugh, admin junk. Deleted them with one hand while massaging his own delusions with the other. He had no idea I was slowly coating every surface of his shiny little throne in kerosene. I even made myself useful. Volunteered via one final scheduled Teams call. Helped train the intern who was temporarily absorbing my responsibilities. That poor girl. I liked her. Smart, eager, slightly terrified. I slipped into the call like I wasn't plotting federal-level revenge and guided her through process flowcharts while casually screen-sharing files that just happened to include references to outdated SOPs and conflicting bonus eligibility language. Oh, whoops, I'd say, highlighting a clause. That's not the current version. Strange, I thought legal updated that last quarter. No worries, I'll flag it. She nodded, eyes wide, scribbling notes. Probably thought I was just being helpful, and I was, to myself. Then came the best part, the shared drive cleanup. You ever want to erase someone without a trace? Don't delete their stuff, catalog it, archive it, tag it under compliance review, and let it rot in limbo. I flagged Bryce's bonus packet with a generic name, internal comp review pending auth, and moved it to a shared HR legal directory with 50 other files. It looked just like noise, but I knew exactly where it sat, and I made sure it had a breadcrumb trail leading right to his time-stamped darling execution. The trick was never letting him hear the music until the cymbals crashed. I kept my LinkedIn quiet. I didn't change my headline or post a dramatic onward and upward message with some inspirational rupee core nonsense. I didn't say a word. Silence was the best camouflage. People assumed I was gone. Some probably figured I was curled up in a snuggie, crying into a la croix. Let them. In truth, I was sharper than I'd been in years. Free from fake team lunches and forced birthday cards. Just me, my laptop, and a growing pile of evidence. Bryce had no clue he'd already tripped the wire. He was still posting smug Slack updates with phrases like team synergy and lean into the Q4 push. Still strutting through Zoom calls like he'd invented leadership. But I could see the cracks. An intern from HR asked me, quietly, why there was no record of any performance meetings before my termination. Another colleague pinged me, asking if I remembered the order in which separation notices were supposed to be filed for audit. I played dumb, offered to forward general resources. I wasn't leading the parade. I was placing the tacks in the street, quietly, carefully, one by one. He'd built his empire on bravado and half-read policies, and I was going to topple it with his own damn handbook. By week 2, Bryce had achieved full peacock mode. He strutted into meetings like he'd just solved world hunger with a spreadsheet. Started calling himself a turnaround specialist in cross-functional calls. Spoke about his own performance in the third person, as if we were all lucky to be orbiting planet Bryce. I watched one recorded town hall where he actually said the phrase, "We don't fire people. We elevate performance standards." Said it with a grin so wide you could park a Tesla in it. Even brought donuts to the office once, handed them out like communion wafers, then winked at the intern while saying, "I believe in rewarding culture." I nearly threw my laptop into traffic, but I kept smiling. On the surface, I was a perfect blend of graciousness and ghosting. I showed up when required, answered emails with thanks for the update, and let me know how I can assist. I even sent Bryce a LinkedIn endorsement for strategic leadership, just to keep the camouflage airtight. Meanwhile, my revenge folder was starting to look like a court exhibit. I had email timestamps, Slack messages, Zoom transcripts, and even a screen recording of our infamous Q3 meeting. Thank you, corporate policy requiring all official meetings be archived for transparency. I clipped the exact moment his mouth formed the word terminated and paired it with the HR clause he'd shattered like a cheap wine glass. But the real gem came on a random Tuesday. An automatic notification popped up in my inbox. Bryce had edited his bonus objectives document. He'd uploaded a revision to the internal HR folder, clearly trying to cover his ass retroactively. The new file was almost identical, except the updated version tried to backdate his performance review documentation and included a clumsy PDF marked Patricia Notice Draft PDF, with mere data showing it was created after the Q3 meeting. It was like watching a toddler try to cover a spilled juice box with printer paper. So I downloaded both versions, filed them under attempted cover-up lol, and then I sent a new memo. Hey team, just looping in legal to confirm the archival versions of all executive comp docs are consistent with audit protocol. Totally innocent. Totally boring. But I made sure to attach both versions of Bryce's bonus objectives file and added a polite footnote. Please disregard if already aligned with current Q3 documentation. Legal didn't reply because they never do, but they saw it. That was the point. A few days later, Bryce announced, loudly, that the board had responded favorably to his restructuring proposals, that his leadership was proving measurable, and that he was on track for performance alignment. He said all this while sipping kombucha out of a mason jar like some kind of Silicon Valley yoga refugee trapped in a polyester suit. I clapped on the Zoom call, gave him a thumbs up, said, "Glad to hear, Bryce." Inside, I was cataloging the final pieces, because I wasn't just documenting violations. I was building the context, making sure every puzzle piece aligned with the next, that the compliance language echoed back into the bonus structure, that the HR handbook pointed directly to his screw-up, that nothing could be dismissed as a coincidence. I even reviewed the annual internal audit checklist and made sure the keywords protocol breach and non-compliant termination were sprinkled into upcoming training materials, just enough that someone might ask about it in the board meeting. Meanwhile, I let Bryce climb higher, encouraged it even. The higher he went, the harder gravity would work in my favor. He started requesting that interns call him Bryce, not Mr. Lane. were a flat org chart. He joked that he'd be the one with the bonus big enough to buy naming rights for the coffee machine. He made a mock trophy that read Q4 Slayer and set it on his desk, right under a printout of a lion with the caption "Hustle Harder." I could have ended him then. The documentation was complete. The trap was baited, but I waited, because timing is everything. You don't serve a revenge dish lukewarm and soggy. You played it with precision. You let the room fill with expectation. And then you flipped the table. Bryce had no idea the quarterly board meeting was going to be his final performance review. And he sure as hell didn't know who'd be turning the page. The call to my lawyer happened on a Sunday night, around 9:47 p.m., because nothing good ever starts with a quick question after dinner unless it involves legal ammunition and Chardonnay. Gregory Moss, my lawyer, consigliere, and the only person who ever told me to bill for emotional labor, answered on the second ring. Patricia, tell me this is either about suing someone or finally starting that revenge candle company we joked about. Option 1, and I've got documents. I could hear his posture straighten through the phone. We met Monday afternoon at his office, a renovated craftsman with the soul of a courtroom and the lighting of an interrogation chamber. Gregory had represented me twice before, once during a previous downsizing, when a VP tried to rewrite my exit terms on a cocktail napkin, and once when I was falsely accused of intellectual property hoarding, which turned out to be a jealous coworker annoyed I backed up shared drives better than IT. Both times, Gregory delivered results that made grown men apologize through gritted teeth. I walked in with a USB drive, a stack of color-coded notes, and the expression of someone who's waited just long enough for justice to feel earned. He raised his eyebrows before I even sat down. "You always come bearing breadcrumbs and blood trails. Lay it out." So I did. I walked him through the entire sequence. From the public firing in the Q3 meeting to the outdated compliance clause. From Bryce's clownish attempt at retroactive document edits to the memos I'd been strategically lacing across legal and HR channels like it was a corporate Easter egg hunt. Gregory leaned back as the story unfolded, that faint grin of a man who just saw the trapdoor under his opponent's feet and knew it was only a matter of time before they fell through. When I showed him the original bonus agreement, the one with the sacred clause in Section 4B, he stopped me mid-sentence and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Wrote one word in capital letters: voidability. "That clause," he said, tapping it with his pen, "is not decoration. It's contractual gunpowder. If what you're telling me is accurate, and it sure looks like it is," he lit the fuse himself. He flipped through a few more pages, paused, and the fact that he tried to update the documentation after the event, that's not just messy, that's desperate, potentially fraudulent depending on who reviewed it and when. I could feel the knot in my stomach start to loosen, not entirely, but enough. "You think we have enough?" I asked, careful not to sound too hopeful. Gregory raised an eyebrow. "Patricia, this is not just enough. This is elegant. You didn't just catch him with his pants down, you've got timestamps, signatures, and internal trails that lead directly to his bonus clause." He paused, then added with a smirk, "If we were in a movie, this is where the audience would start slow clapping." We spent the next 2 hours crafting the final move. Not a threat, not an accusation, just a legal advisory memorandum outlining potential compliance missteps and associated impacts to incentive structures. Language vague enough to avoid immediate confrontation, but sharp enough that any executive with a functioning cerebrum would feel the noose tightening. Gregory would deliver it through the proper channels, folded into a quarterly legal packet, right before the board meeting. No fireworks, just paperwork. The most dangerous kind. The letter itself was a masterpiece of corporate diplomacy, seasoned with just the right amount of venom. As part of ongoing internal compliance assessments, please note that under Section 4B of the Executive Incentive Agreement, actions outside defined termination protocol may impact eligibility for incentive payouts. This includes, but is not limited to, immediate separations conducted outside of approved HR processes without documented review. See reference memo Q3 to 998X for supporting documentation. The reference memo was, of course, mine. The last paragraph simply stated, "No further action required at this time unless clarification is deemed necessary." Translation: we're not saying you broke the rules, but we know you did, and we've documented it. By the time I left Gregory's office, the clouds were already clearing in my chest. Not full sunshine yet, but a sky beginning to crack open. It wasn't just cautious optimism, it was the slow hum of inevitability. The stage was set. The memo was en route. The board meeting was 3 days away. Bryce was still parading around like a motivational speaker on meth, and he didn't know the opening act was over. Act Roman 2 was about to begin. And this time I held the script. 3 days. That's how long I had between delivering the legal memo and the quarterly meeting that would either gut Bryce's bonus, or, if everything failed, cement him as the golden boy with a lion poster and a $3 million grin. 3 days to make sure the dominoes were not only standing, but positioned so precisely that one flick of the CEO's finger would send them crashing with glorious finality. I didn't sleep much that first night. Not because I was nervous, because I kept replaying the plan, looking for cracks. I wasn't scared of losing, I was scared of missing the perfect collapse. I wanted it seamless, silent, a moment so surgical that it wouldn't even look like revenge, just justice dressed in compliance reports and legalese. Gregory had filed the memo under the Q3 legal governance brief, embedded as page 7 in a packet of otherwise dry reading, would be distributed to the board 24 hours before the meeting. Standard protocol, which meant I had exactly 1 day left to make sure the right eyes lingered on the right lines. Subtlety, at this point, wasn't just a tactic, it was the whole game, so I started playing chess. I emailed Marion, the board chair's executive assistant, and the gatekeeper of all things sacred, under the guise of following up on a previously flagged expense policy discrepancy. I thanked her for always being thorough and casually added a PS. I believe some of the legal governance updates may impact how we're classifying executive bonus structures this quarter, just FYI in case any discussion materials need updating. I didn't attach anything. I didn't explain, but Marion was smart. She knew how to read between lines. If you've ever worked in corporate long enough, you understand that women like Marion don't need full sentences to understand war is brewing. You just have to hum the right melody, and they'll hear the lyrics. Next, Alan, the CFO. I didn't reach out directly, too obvious. Instead, I added a comment in the shared finance doc still under my access from the transition team, another oversight on their part. It was a note about bonus eligibility verification for executive payouts, referencing the same policy clause mentioned in the memo. 2 clicks, one polite comment, no alarms, and finally I scheduled a delayed send email to legal, addressed to the junior counsel I'd once coached through her first compliance audit. Subject, quick check, Section 4B updates still current? Body, was going through old documentation and realized we never confirmed this clause during the last audit cycle. Just want to make sure we're aligned before Q4 planning. Thanks. I knew she'd open it right before the meeting prep session. I timed it for 8:17 a.m., 43 minutes before the boardroom doors would open and Bryce would start his PowerPoint peacocking routine. Each action was a whisper, each nudge a breath against a house of cards he built out of linked-in cliches and unchecked arrogance. And through it all, I said nothing publicly. No dramatic posts, no back-channel gossip. I didn't warn anyone, because that would have given him a villain to point to if things fell apart. I didn't want that. I wanted him confused. I wanted him unraveling in real time, not knowing where the rope started or how it got wrapped around his own neck. The day before the meeting, I cleaned my apartment top to bottom, not because it needed it, but because I needed something methodical to do with my hands. I vacuumed under the couch, deep scrubbed the oven, even refolded my towels like I lived in a restoration hardware catalog. By the time I went to bed, everything was in place. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click like the second hand on a stopwatch. Somewhere across town, Bryce was probably practicing his speech, smiling in the mirror, rehearsing buzzwords like transformational leadership and synergy acceleration, maybe even planning which blazer to wear, like to match his slides, like a corporate cartoon character. Meanwhile, his entire financial future was balancing on a sentence buried in page 7 of a legal memo he hadn't read. That's the thing about people like Bryce, they think the rules are for other people. They skate by on charm, noise, and pretending to know what the hell they're doing until no one asks questions anymore. They rely on silence. But silence is a double-edged sword, because if no one's watching, they miss the moment when someone like me stops being quiet out of fear and starts being quiet out of calculation. And tomorrow was the quarterly meeting. He thought he was walking into a standing ovation. He didn't realize the spotlight was a laser sight. Bryce walked into that boardroom like he owned the oxygen. Hair slicked back, smile preloaded, and that damn navy blazer he always wore when he thought he was about to make history. One with the embroidered initials on the cuff, subtle enough to say money, loud enough to scream insecure. He brought coffee for everyone, from that boutique roaster down the street with cups so pretentious they had QR codes for flavor notes. The kind of performative generosity he believed made him relatable. A lion among lambs, a leader who invests in his people. The boardroom, for what it's worth, looked like every other one in America. Gray walls, bad abstract art, polished wood table that smelled faintly of varnish and fear. I was seated 3 chairs down from the head with my tablet open and face passive. The room was cold, but not from the AC, cold in the way air gets when something is about to detonate. Bryce started the meeting with a joke. Don't worry, I only brought slides, not layoffs. A few polite chuckles. One board member rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. He launched into his deck. First slide, Q3 recap elevating performance. Bullet points, buzzwords, bar charts that meant nothing. A showcase of hollow wins, streamlined operations, culture realignment, talent optimization. I watched his hands move, punctuating nonsense with open palms and exaggerated nods, as if honesty could be mimed into existence. Then he said it. I'd like to thank the board in advance for recognizing the work this quarter. I know there was some concern about transitions, but I think the results speak for themselves. I trust the bonus structure we discussed will reflect these outcomes. He actually winked at the board, like he was auditioning for a Cialis commercial. I said nothing, didn't twitch, didn't flinch, didn't even breathe differently. Just looked down at my notes and highlighted the phrase anticipated payout confirmation pending compliance review. 2 seats down, CFO furrowed his brow. Behind him, one of the lawyers adjusted her collar. Bryce kept going. I've already started drafting Q4 initiatives, he said, flipping to a slide titled Next Steps, Scaling Greatness. And I'd love to pilot a few new leadership frameworks, things like quarterly alignment dinners, 360-degree feedback pods, maybe even an internal podcast. Culture is king, and I plan to wear the crown. My teeth clenched under my smile. Then, as if summoned by fate or bureaucracy's slow, delicious sense of timing, the door opened. In walked Marian, the board chair's assistant. She walked briskly to the CEO, handed him a folder, and whispered something I couldn't hear. The room shifted slightly, like everyone had just noticed the sky darken. The CEO flipped open the folder, scanned the first page. He didn't react immediately, just kept reading. Second page, third. Page 7. His pen stopped moving. He looked up, and for a full 3 seconds, his eyes locked on Bryce like he was reading an obituary in real time. Bryce was mid-sentence, something about cross-functional synergy points when the CEO held up a hand. Let's pause there. The air tightened, like someone had sucked the oxygen straight out of the room and sealed the vents. The CEO turned to legal. This memo, he said slowly, tapping the folder, was this reviewed in advance. The junior counsel, the same one I'd emailed 43 minutes prior, adjusted her glasses. Yes, it was submitted with the Q3 legal governance brief. Page 7 contains a summary clause pulled from Section 4B of the Executive Incentive Agreement. We flagged it as informational. Bryce blinked. What clause? He asked, trying to keep his voice light, breezy. The one that governs eligibility requirements for executive incentive payouts, the CEO said, specifically regarding compliance protocol during involuntary terminations. And there it was, the first crack. Bryce opened his mouth, closed it, smiled. Oh, that's a standard legal language, doesn't really apply in our case. All separations were compliant to my knowledge, to his knowledge. I stayed still, didn't even look at him. The CEO didn't smile. He just placed the folder flat on the table, hands folded over it. Patricia, he said casually, without looking my way, can you confirm the details of your departure? Every eye turned toward me. I looked up slowly. Calm, measured. I was let go during the Q3 performance meeting, in front of the full team without prior notice or review. No HR consult, no performance plan, just an announcement mid-meeting. It's all on the recording. The room didn't react loudly. There were no gasps, just a heavy, silent shift in gravity. Like a courtroom when the jury realizes the knife didn't come from the kitchen drawer, it came from the glove box. Bryce chuckled. Well, I mean that's subjective. There's more nuance to it. The CFO cleared his throat. Did legal approve that separation? Bryce looked around, suddenly unsure of where to place his hands. I assumed protocol was followed. I delegated the compliance. The CEO raised one eyebrow. Delegated to whom? Silence. Then came the death sentence. We'll need to review your bonus eligibility in light of this. In the meantime, let's table that item for now. Bryce's face froze in a polite half-smile that looked like it had been hit by a truck. He nodded once, stiffly, of course. I looked down again, calm as ever, and took another note. 3 words, bullet, just missed. Except it hadn't. It was still in the air, just waiting to land. The air in the room had that strange stillness right before a thunderstorm, where you feel the shift in pressure, but no one's acknowledging it yet. Bryce was fidgeting with his clicker, trying to act like nothing was off. His mouth moved, still pitching Q4 goals to a room no longer listening, but his eyes kept darting to the CEO's folder like it was ticking. The CEO, for his part, had gone full statue. He didn't interrupt, didn't nod, just let Bryce keep talking himself deeper into the hole. Meanwhile, his fingers were drumming lightly, methodically, against the edge of the legal memo Gregory, and I had buried on page 7. His other hand was flipping pages again, eyes narrowing with each pass. Then came the shift. The CEO reached to his left, tapped the conference room intercom, and said, "Gregory Moss, please join us." I didn't move, didn't breathe, just traced my pen over the same line in my notes I'd been doodling for the last 10 minutes. Integrity clause enforcement pending. Gregory walked in exactly 90 seconds later, cool as bourbon and twice as smooth. Black suit, red tie, no expression. He carried nothing but a single manila folder, the kind that always either ends a lawsuit or starts one. Bryce perked up, confused. Is there a legal issue? No, Gregory said, taking the seat next to me without making eye contact. Just a clarification. He slid our folder, across the table to the CEO. Crisp, deliberate. The CEO opened it without a word. Inside were two printed documents: Bryce's original bonus agreement, complete with the sacred Section 4B clause highlighted in orange, and a screenshot of the Q3 meeting transcript, timestamped precisely when Bryce fired me mid-presentation. Then, the cover sheet, a memo drafted by Gregory, simple and devastating. Executive Compensation Eligibility, Q3 Bonus Disqualification Trigger Summary. Based on documentation and meeting records, executive action on date constitutes a clear breach of Section 4B as outlined in the 2023 Incentive Agreement. Termination protocol was not followed per policy. Therefore, eligibility for bonus payout is nullified as per clause language. See attached. The room went so quiet you could hear the HVAC switch on above us. The CEO read the memo, then read it again, this time slower. And then he looked up, first at Gregory, then at me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes said everything. You did this, you planned this, you waited, and now we're here. I gave him nothing in return, no grin, no gloat, just that same calm composure I'd worn for weeks. Inside, my heart was doing backflips, but outside, I was a watercolor of professionalism. Bryce finally broke the silence. Wait, I don't understand. This wasn't a formal termination. It was more of a performance redirection. The CFO actually coughed out a laugh, one short, incredulous bark. The CEO didn't blink. He turned the page back to the bonus clause and read it aloud, slowly. All performance-based compensation shall be rendered void if executive initiates any involuntary employee termination outside of documented, private compliance protocol. And then, softly, that's exactly what happened, isn't it? Bryce's face drained of color. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. There must be a misunderstanding. Legal didn't object. HR didn't stop me. Gregory leaned forward just slightly. Actually, HR had no documentation, and legal was never consulted. We have the server logs. The CEO held up a hand. Enough. He flipped the folder closed, then looked directly at Bryce for the first time in 10 minutes. You didn't follow protocol. You terminated an employee on record, mid-meeting, without process. That triggers the clause. Bryce tried to speak again, but his throat gave up before the words did. He looked at me finally, eyes wild, as if expecting me to step in, defend him, correct the record, anything. But I just held his gaze for a moment. Then I looked away, like he wasn't even there, because as far as his bonus was concerned, he wasn't. The board members began flipping through their packets. One muttered something about fiduciary obligations. Another quietly asked the CFO to rerun Q3 bonus projections without Bryce's cut. Someone else, less them, asked if we should bring in HR for a replacement recommendation. It was happening. The unraveling, not with screaming, not with sirens, just quiet realization spreading like ink in water. I sat there, hands folded in front of me, listening to the symphony of consequences finally arriving. Bryce still hadn't moved. He just stared at the closed folder as if he could will it to vanish. But that document wasn't just real. It was signed, sealed, legally binding. And his signature was the first one on the page. The CEO set the folder down like it weighed 30 pounds. His voice, when he spoke, was even, controlled, almost dispassionate, but that's what made it so lethal. Per the legal advisory and corresponding documentation, he said, scanning the table slowly, it is the board's determination that Mr. Lane has, through noncompliance with Section 4B of the Executive Incentive Agreement, voided his own eligibility for the Q3 bonus payout. There it was, not an accusation, a sentence, the kind that doesn't end in a question mark, just a career. The room didn't erupt, not immediately. Corporate unravelings are quieter than most people expect. A few board members leaned back in their chairs, others began flipping through their own copies of the packet to reread the clause like it was a newly discovered gospel. One of them murmured, $3 million, like it was the punchline to a joke no one wanted to laugh at. Bryce sat frozen, palms flat on the table. His face was a masterclass in cognitive dissonance, half disbelief, half waiting for someone to say just kidding. No one did. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Nothing. Words had finally abandoned him the way protocol had. I wasn't aware this clause was still active, he managed finally, his voice hoarse. Gregory didn't even look up. That's not a defense. The CEO simply nodded. Bonus is null, retroactively effective immediately. Wait, Bryce croaked, leaning forward. There's gotta be, this feels retaliatory. She's behind this, he pointed at me, like a child pointing at the empty cookie jar, hoping mom would punish the kitchen. Everyone turned to look at me. I tilted my head slightly. Calm, neutral. I followed protocol, I said. You didn't, and that was it. No screaming match. No revenge monologue, just facts. Clean, surgical, damning. The kind of facts no one can shout over. The CEO stood. We'll reconvene later today to discuss transition options. For now, this meeting is adjourned. Chairs pushed back, papers gathered. No one said a word to Bryce, not a single one. It was the kind of silence that hurts more than yelling, the kind where you realize you're not worth the energy anymore. He remained seated, jaw slack, eyes unfocused, like a man who just watched the ground disappear beneath his feet and couldn't quite process the fall. I walked out last, didn't rush, didn't look back. The hallway was empty. The elevator took its time arriving, and I stood there, arms folded, the hum of overhead fluorescents buzzing like distant applause. Downstairs, I headed to the cafe across the street, the same place Bryce used to order his overpriced matcha and tell anyone within earshot about his leadership mindset. I ordered a regular coffee, black hot, no room, sat by the window. It was a beautiful morning. I watched as board members slowly filed out of the building, some on calls, others just walking silently with that haunted look people get when they realize the smartest guy in the room was the one they tried to erase. My phone buzzed. Gregory, it's done. He's toast, enjoy the view. I smiled and put the phone down, took a long sip. Outside, the office carried on, employees walking, taxis honking, time marching forward like it always does. But inside those walls, my name was no longer a footnote, it was a warning. Because you don't erase a woman like me mid-meeting and expect her to disappear. You expect her to break, to vanish. What you don't expect is that she's been reading the handbook the whole damn time. And when the right moment comes, she'll pour your own policies down your throat and watch you drown, quietly, legally, and with impeccable posture. That coffee never tasted so good. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.